Thank you for your time today. It's been a very interesting conversation. I've got a few areas I want to touch on, but I did have a chance to review your report, which was issued yesterday, and it's quite a sobering read. And there are so many things that jump out from it, but one of the things that jumped out at me was the heading where you talk about the exceptional policy response that the bank and then the government of Canada is engaged in. You list them all, basically, the CERB, the wage subsidy, the bond purchasing, the municipal bond purchasing, all of those things you talk about. I guess my question is, we don't know, because no one's able to say how protracted this situation is going to be and how long we're going to be in this kind of period of suspended animation. And the way I like to think about it, and correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like essentially the government and the bank have put the economy on a form of life support. I guess my question for you is, how long can we keep this up? How long can the Bank of Canada and the government of Canada keep us in this state before things start to go wrong? And what kinds of things could go wrong if it goes on for too long?
Okay, well, I agree. It is sobering. That's for sure. The metaphor of life support, I'm less a fan of. I think of it as stopping the clock. As I said before, we stop the clock, and in as many respects as possible, just let everybody sit back, and then we're just going to restart the clock. And of course, we're going to start it up in a few steps because we can't just do everything overnight. And so that I think is important for us to bear in mind that this is a temporary thing. That's even, we can watch what has happened in China, for example, or we can, if you prefer, we can look at South Korea, or we can look at Italy. There's some cases that are better than others, of course, but they all have a cycle that we go through. So this is not an open-ended situation. Our scenario that we describe as our best case, given where we are today, would have us looking at various places in the economy where they begin to restart sometime in May, late May probably, and in early June. So not 100% restored, but maybe lots of us will continue to work the way we are now, right? Virtual working and working from home until the testing is very widespread and the confidence builds that we've got things under control. All that to say that the economy should begin restarting before the third quarter starts, and for sure we'll be doing so in the third quarter. So that means we're going to get a V-shaped trajectory, so down very sharply, then of course back up, but not all the way, but sort of a half V, like a cursive V, where it has and then the rest of the cursive V where it curls up at the end. And that's when it takes another maybe a year for the economy to get back to the same path that it was on before all this started. So when we look back at this, we'll say, well, that was a full year, more or less, departure from our previous path. And that will happen if we've done a good job of buttressing confidence and having people ready for that recovery period. And I think the tools that have been deployed have the best chance of doing exactly that.
Unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm back. Yeah. I just want to circle back to the issue of inflation. I know you've made your argument that essentially all this economic stimulus is really designed to get you back to, I guess, the market equilibrium that you shoot for in your policy around inflation, which is 2%. Mm-hmm. I can't help but I raised this in other meetings back in just after World War I. There was a major recession, post-World War I recession. Governments in Europe and in North America did a lot of these same things. And we wound up, and I think Weimar Republic in Germany is the best example, with massive hyperinflation. Inflation that was, where prices were doubling every day to multiple powers. I'm just wondering why you're so confident that we're not going to, post this horrible situation we're in, have to deal with that? And if we do, what effect could you be forced into utilizing interest rates as a tool to get that back under control?
Well, yes. I mean, that would be a nice problem to have, to be frank. As a consensus among economists, our biggest concern here is that net, this will be a disinflationary occurrence, okay? That the economy will recover slowly enough that there's persistent downward pressure on inflation. And that's why I said it's so important that if we didn't do this, there would be a significant disinflationary force acting on the economy. And if we actually fell into the territory where we had negative inflation for a persistent period of time, this is the part that economists really want to avoid most of all. And that's because when you have existing debt and prices are falling, in real terms, the debt is rising. And your ability to service it is actually falling through time. So that interaction is the kind of interaction which gives you prolonged recessions, or perhaps even that's how the Great Depression unfolded. And so avoiding that means being really aggressive with these kinds of policies that we're talking about today. And I was only half kidding when I said if inflation pressures did start to emerge, that would be a nice problem to have, because that is the one that we know the best how to deal with. And you'll be right, but as those conditions evolved, you'd be saying, it's time for all this to start going back to normal, and back it would go to normal. And yes, interest rates would rise normally in that situation and cool things off to a point where we have the perfect soft landing. That's the dream. That's the dream scenario.
Well, so you do think interest rates could rise after all this is?
Well, yes. When we get back to normal, interest rates will certainly rise. Yes.
Okay.